Is having undiagnosed ADHD and autism the reason I don't have children? It's a question I've asked myself many times, and I'm leaning towards yes. I wanted to break down why I think that is and go through the thought processes of me at different stages in my life. So for each decade, I'm going to talk about what I was thinking, what was I thinking, and what was going on in my life, and how did I get to this point where I'm 51 and I don't have children. And this also is not going to be an emotional video. I know that for some people, you see someone cry and you start to cry. There's going to be none of that here. If you don't know me, my name is Lisa, and I'm a midlife wanderer, making sense of my life now that I know that I'm AudHD, which is the co-occurrence of ADHD and autism. Winding back through the years, I always wondered if there were clues about whether I wanted to be a mother or I didn't know. And honestly, as a child, I didn't play with baby dolls that much. Maybe Barbies, but I think I was more interested in horses and that type of thing. In fact, I was obsessed with horses, and I think we know now that very focused interests are a key indicator of autism, but we didn't know. Childhood honestly wasn't the best. I feel like there was definitely some undiagnosed neurodivergent going on in there. Definitely a lot of emotional dysregulation, so a lot of screaming and shouting and anxiety. When I was in my late teens, we had an assignment where we were asked to write down where we wanted our life to be in 10 years, or what would life look like. And I wrote down that I wanted to travel, I wanted to go to New York, and I was going to have kids at 26. And that's a very specific number, but I know now the only reason I wrote that down is because that's when my mom had me. I think as a teenager, I didn't really think for myself. I would often just copy what other people did around me. So in fact, I was copying my parents when it came to musical tastes, which, I'm so glad I learned to think for myself. It was also drummed in that having children was a lot of work, and it just really changed your life. And honestly, being a parent, it wasn't like I wasn't sold on the idea at this stage, you know what I mean? So then we came into my age 19. I took birth control pills, and it gave me a blood clot. So as a result of that blood clot, I got valve damage in one leg and was told by doctors that, pregnancy would be challenging now that they knew I was at risk for having blood clots because I was diagnosed with factor V Leiden. And then the other issue, of course, is that the pregnancy could make my veins have even more issues. So that was scary, and I think I put that that kind of stuck in my head. My 20s, I just wanted to have fun. I did get married, and we did move to England. And I wasn't particularly career focused. Having children was the last thing in my mind. I just was really enjoying my life, exploring Europe, finally, living in England, it's easy to get around. I had 2 major relationships in my 20s, and in both of them, we talked about having kids, but it never really was a priority. And I know now that I really wanted to travel. I was aware that, not having kids would allow me to keep traveling. So I just, in my head, thought, this can wait. I would also like to add that throughout my entire life, starting with my 20s, I was moving between apartments or houses. I was also moving between relationships sometimes. And I know now that that's the ADHD, the novelty seeking. So yeah, I was well aware that by not having kids, I was able to have more freedom. Freedom to move, freedom to travel. So in my 30s, my major relationship and we moved to the United States. It was fun at first, but then, I don't know, something happened and the relationship ended. And that was that. Although I had never felt particularly career-focused this entire time. Oh, hi. Oh, hi. I would say throughout my 20s and 30s, I was never particularly career-focused. It was more about just getting through the day-to-day in some ways. It was really hard to articulate why I didn't want to climb the career ladder. I wasn't a career person. But, when I was single again, the pressure was there that I definitely need to support myself, which was fine. I was able to do that before. But as a single person, I had a lot of thoughts around, if I can barely take care of myself, then how the heck would I take care of a baby? And at this point, you never can rely on your partner, your husband, to do a lot of that childcare. So I knew the burden would be on me, and I didn't have family locally, so it was going to be all on me, right? But now I know the challenges were around executive dysfunction. That's the struggle that a lot of people with ADHD and autism have around just doing the day-to-day. So for me, if I was able to show up to do my job and be dressed and maybe cook myself something, that was enough achievements for one day. There was absolutely no room for anything else. I did not have the physical or mental capacity for it. And spoiler alert, it gets worse in perimenopause. It was living with partners, that I became really aware of these challenges I have. My biggest challenges when it comes to executive dysfunction are things so simple like closing cabinet drawers, closing drawers, putting away laundry, just keeping the house tidy. I think the term floordrobe just makes me smile because that is exactly how it works a lot of the time. At any rate, at 39, I moved back to England by myself, which is fine. I'm not afraid of things like that. I had no job, but I did have friends, and I had somewhere to live, and I had a bank account. So, a lot of the big worries were not there. Also, I had my UK passport at that point. So in my 40s, I had another major relationship. This one was interesting because there were so many emotions involved, so many positive emotions, but also a lot of negative emotions. And we actually did try for children. I even went to see a fertility specialist. And yeah, sadly, it didn't work out. I guess I can say that I had 2 positive results and 2 early losses, which were just devastating. I don't know if you've seen Mr. Selfridge, but there's this scene where one of the characters, a woman in her 40s, says to her love interest when he couldn't commit to her, she said, "But I gave you my fertile years." And I felt that deep down. I knew that was going to be me, and that was the situation. And yeah, ultimately we parted ways, and that was tough, definitely tough. It was around this time, so we're talking early 40s, that I became more aware of my sensory sensitivities. So the biggest way it manifested itself is I could not sleep next to anybody. So I was so hyper aware of breathing, heat, movement, smell, snoring. Me suddenly not wanting to sleep next to that other person was harmful to the relationship because they took it as a rejection. And it was really hard for me to explain, it's either I sleep in this other room or I don't sleep at all. I definitely know now that having kids would have amplified all those sensory sensitivities. Then I went through this weird desperate phase where I was considering sperm donors, thinking, well, maybe I should try to have a baby by myself. But ultimately, I decided that just wasn't a good idea. Yeah, I'm still convinced that was a terrible idea. If you found out about your ADHD and/or autism later on in life and think that it's significantly shaped your life choices, including family, I'd be interested to hear your perspectives in the comments. In the meantime, I found my tribe. There's a group called Gateway Women founded by someone called Jody Day. And back then there were meetup groups. I joined a couple local ones, and it mostly meant going to brunch. It was through that group that I met a core group of friends who are in the same boat as me, or a very similar boat, where thinking they were going to have kids, but not having kids. And I'm so glad I have that group of friends now. And even though our brunches aren't that frequent, I still catch up with a lot of them one-on-one, and we message, and it feels great to have that type of support. I think there was a lot of grieving that went on, maybe in my late 40s, mid to late 40s. But ultimately I'm past that now. So it's hard if you do find that you're in the situation where you're grieving that you don't have children. My suggestion is to find somebody find a group of people who are in the same level of grieving that you're in. My cohort, we're past the worst of it. We still get irked off when we see these pro-natalist headlines every once in a while, but for the most part, we're happy and we're living our lives, and it is the case of life goes on. I don't identify with the labels child-free or childless, so they mean very different things, and you will get torn to shreds if you use the wrong one in certain online forums. So child-free means that it's somebody who's chosen to have a life without children, and childless, it can mean it's somebody who wanted to have children but didn't have them. And I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I said, it wasn't like a deliberate decision. I think I aged out of the option at some point. So there's another label, which is childless not by choice, CNBC, which is fine.
I do, however, identify as a crazy cat lady.
Anyway, reflections. So yes, I do blame my undiagnosed neurodivergence on not having children. It's the way that the ADHD and the autism have impacted my relationships. I think that's possibly been a bigger factor because, if I'd known about it, I could have, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Just knowing that there would be life struggles around making decisions and getting things done, being able to focus on the right things and not hyper-focus on the other things that are ultimately really interesting to me but don't move the needle in terms of life satisfaction or life improvement. I mean, I might have tried ADHD meds, but now I'm a bit scared. I feel like I'm a little bit old and stuck in my ways. Like, I don't know. I kind of resist the idea of taking medication. Do I regret not having kids? No, not really. I think my life so far has been really amazing. I've seen some cool places. I've done some amazing things. And the great thing is that I achieved those things. Those experiences have been down to my choices, the work that I put in, and the effort I made to make it happen. So yeah, I'm good.